besides muscle, what are some of the other effects that protein has on our biology?
Totally. Proteins are the building blocks in the world of biological materials. So protein in its simplest form can be amine hormones, for example, things like insulin or insulin growth factor made out of proteins. They can also be enzymes. They can also be folded into different helixes, and that can form collagen. They can form macrostructures like bones. They can be carrier molecules like lipoproteins. You know, all these different structures in our body we don't think of, but these are all made out of proteins. And when you start realizing that, you realize, oh, that's why when you consume protein in your diet, only 25% goes to your muscles. The vast majority of the protein that you're consuming is going to all these other physiological processes in your body.
So that's why your brain is like craving protein. But the craving of protein is really just a hunger signal. And if you don't have any protein around, what you're saying, you'll reach for the nearest ultra processed snack, and you're still going to be hungry. Dr. Rupy, I'm so glad you're here today. Thank you so much for joining me. So I just have a few quick questions for you.
Let's do it.
Based on what I've heard from you, just so we can whet the audience's appetite of what we're going to talk about today. All right. So what is a food trend that you've heard about recently that is coming up a lot and what people are asking about?
Yeah, so there's a very recent food trend called fiber maxing on TikTok. I don't know if you've heard of it.
That sounds uncomfortable.
It sounds uncomfortable. And like, I think it's with good intention because people have learned about fiber, the benefits to your heart health, the benefits to your gut health, the benefits for weight loss. But like any sort of social media trend, they're taking it to the extreme where they're having raw chia, as much fiber as possible at every single meal time. They're adding flaxseed, they're adding inulin powder, chicory root. They're adding all these different prebiotic fibers. And look, these are all fantastic for you, but particularly if you're used to a low fiber diet, like most people in the United States, and you transition to a higher fiber diet, you got to go slow because not only will your gut tell you about it, it will tell everyone else about it as well. You're going to be producing a lot of gas. You're going to have a lot of bloating. You're going to have a lot of pain. So fiber maxing is a trend that I could definitely get behind, but I would say try and do it slower, maybe with one new ingredient every single week, and then try and titrate that up to a nice fiber amount per meal.
Yeah. I mean, you know, one of the things that I've learned from you actually is this concept of one more thing. And for me, that one more thing is always a little bit of extra fiber because when I'm putting a meal together, you know, most of the time you just like, sure, let me add a little bit more fiber to that. But fiber maxing, the word max on there, it sounds uncomfortable. Let me ask you about morning habits. What is one thing that you wish everyone would do every morning?
You know what? I would say it's getting movement and morning light every single morning. So I'm a morning guy, so it's very easy for me to just go outside, have my glass of water. So I hydrate first thing. I will have coffee probably around 60 minutes after waking, just because I want my natural cortisol levels to rise and then not be artificially elevated by anything that I'm drinking, like caffeine. But having that morning light to stimulate your receptors in your brain to get you awake, and moving in the morning, again, something that gets your energy levels up, is just such a fantastic hack to improve your focus and keep those energy levels steady throughout the day and just wake yourself up out of that sleep. And the benefit of that is not only for the morning and the day, but it's also for your sleep at night. So you actually get yourself into a sleepy state and you operate within the circadian rhythm.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. You know, I think a lot of us, and I was a victim of this too, was I would wake up and I would do the minimal amount of movement I could until I finally got to work, which is usually like 2 hours after I woke up. And then I'm finally like walking from my car to the office and moving around. And you end up getting really low energy from that because you just haven't started your day off right. And
it's weird because people think you have to expend energy when you move, but actually what you're doing is you're increasing your mitochondria, you're increasing your adrenaline levels, your cortisol levels are also being increased as well. So this is all actually giving you energy. So it's paradoxical to think about, okay, movement, expending energy, and then like having more energy later on, but that's literally what's happening when you move.
We could dive so much into that, like the calorie hypothesis.
Yeah.
It's just, you're absolutely right. Like our human biology is almost like it wants to be moving.
Yes.
You create more energy. It's like a flywheel almost.
100%.
Right? You create more energy the more movement you have.
Yeah. I've been, I always think about things through the evolutionary lens, right? Like how we are actually designed to move, how we've evolved over millennia. And we are not designed to be doing what we're now,
exactly,
like sitting down.
Exactly.
And actually, I almost think it's like, your inflammation counter sort of creeps up the more that you're sitting down, and you almost need to discharge that with some movement. So whatever, I always tell people, you got to move at least once every hour. You got to be walking, take those meetings outside, expose yourself to the natural elements, and ensure that you're actually sort of mimicking how we're designed, because we would have been hunting and gathering over long plains of land, getting outside, getting that vitamin D from the sun. And we're doing the exact opposite right now. So it's just one element of our lifestyle that we can optimize with a few simple things.
Yeah. I feel like you and I have a lot of the same kind of thoughts. Yeah. And if anyone's watching on YouTube, you're like my younger, much better looking twin right here. I feel like I'm talking to myself in the mirror 20 years ago. Yeah. But I've really landed on this evolutionary biology philosophy of health, where the more you look back at how humans evolved over thousands and thousands of years, it's just ridiculous how over the last 50 years, we've completely flipped that model on its head, right?
Yeah.
We used to move, now we don't move. We used to wake up when the sun came out and go to bed when it became dark. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
The time we eat, like all of these rhythms that we've evolved to coexist with, the rhythm of day to day, the rhythm of the sun, the moon, the universe.
Yeah.
We've eliminated them artificially in our life. And that is a massive contributor to the poor health we see now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
I feel like rhythms is like a book title almost, because it's like about getting back into rhythm with how we have evolved. And I had a friend of mine on the podcast recently who is an evolutionary biologist.
Oh, really?
And he talks about this concept called intermittent living, and it's how we currently live in a constant state of grazing. So, for example, intermittent fasting, which has become very popular now, is very much mimicking how we would have eaten before. We wouldn't have had snacks all day long. We would have eaten, we would have feasted, and we would have stopped, and then we would have moved.
Right.
The same thing with morning light, for example. We would have got up first thing in the morning, got out of our caves or out of our camps or wherever, and we would have exposed ourselves to light. We would have been constantly moving throughout the entire day. We would have been even intermittently drinking, which is a bit of a sort of a bit of a controversial statement there. But we wouldn't have been constantly drinking. We would have had to walk so long to get to
That's so true.
a water hole and then hydrate ourselves. And then we would have to... So there are all these like little stressors that we sort of have to reintroduce into our day-to-day, because we live in so much comfort, temperature-controlled environments, protected, artificially lit environments, and environments of eating which are like completely conducive to comfort and to never being hungry. And we have to artificially engineer these into our lives. And I think that's why things like sauna and cold therapy have become so popular. And there are a benefit to these things. There are a benefit to cold shocks. And the sort of resolution of our body when we experience cold or heat, that's where the magic happens. It's almost like exercise is another form of stressor that we have to introduce, because otherwise we could just sit down all day and order Uber Eats and cars and whatever, and we just never need to move. So this is something that everyone should be thinking about.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I think if you look at it at a cellular level, even deeper in the cells to your mitochondria, it's during those periods of stress that we create that our cell actually ends up going through a period of regeneration, meaning, and our mitochondria do as well, where whether you're doing a sauna or you're fasting, that's when we clear out the old cells that are no longer functioning well and the old mitochondria that are no longer functioning well and create new ones.
Yeah.
And this is so ingrained in our cellular biology.
Yeah.
And if we don't give our body a chance to do that every day, many times a day, it doesn't happen. And then we just build up all this gunk and garbage in our bodies at a cellular level.
Totally. I feel like we're learning a bit more about the blueprint of our biology. And the more we learn, and I guess people like ourselves have come to this a little bit earlier than others, the more we realize, okay, some of those ancient traditions and those ancient practices actually hold value in modern medicine. And we need to start sort of engineering this back into our lives. So, I'm a fan of intermittent fasting as long as you get enough protein in your day. I think protein is super, super important. And those stresses, it's like this concept of hormesis, which is a little bit of stress actually does some good. It's sort of playing out in the biology of mitochondria in our cells and the concepts around rebuilding proteins, autophagy, and removing senescent cells. So
right, exactly. And the more we learn about this, these are some of the basic cellular processes that lead to longevity. I'm sure you're very familiar with the article in Cell magazine about the root causes of why cells age, right?
Yeah.
These are the things that we're talking about. We're hitting on a lot of them right now.
Yeah, absolutely. These hallmarks of aging, which, I always forget like the exact ones. It used to be 9, and I think it's like 11 now, but it all comes down to protein misfolding, us not reading our DNA sequence anymore. But we could zoom into inflammation, like that's the cause. You can zoom into gut health, and that's the cause. One thing that I've come down to is putting our body in the correct environment, and it sort of knows what to do. So the correct environment, like we've been alluding to this whole conversation, getting up early, morning light, moving your body, eating intermittently, experiencing some stressor, whether that's exercise or cold or heat, maintaining good emotional health, something that perhaps doesn't get talked about as much, looking after your gut with a variety of different ingredients, whole unprocessed food. These are all things that align with our biology. And the challenge is not actually the information, it's the implementation of these ideas. And so I think, what you're doing with Next Health and what I'm trying to do with getting people to cook from scratch, that it's all sort of aligned in that same aim.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take it a step back and just learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, sure.
I think you have a great story, and you're a physician and from the UK.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about kind of your career and how you shifted into, your first book was a cookbook. Is that right? Yeah. First book. Yeah. So, not too many doctors write cookbooks out there. So I'd love to hear the story behind.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been practicing as a medical doctor for over 15 years. So I started off in the NHS and, my journey toward lifestyle medicine or functional medicine or, stepping outside of traditional conventional medicine that I was taught in Imperial College really came about because of my own health issues. So I started suffering from atrial fibrillation when I was a 24-year-old.
Oh, wow.
It was during a really long stint of shifts that I was working at in my hospital. My heart started beating irregularly and very, very fast. I was admitted to my own hospital during a shift that I was on.
Wow.
I was parked right next to a patient I'd been seeing earlier that day, who was very confusing for this poor lady because the doctor that was seeing her a couple of hours before was now parked next to her, connected to a cardiac monitor. So it was quite funny then. But I remember this sense of embarrassment when I was admitted and just being wheeled down the corridor to have some of my investigations. And the sort of diagnosis at the time was, maybe I had a bit too much caffeine, maybe I hadn't hydrated properly that day. It was a one-off, but actually I would start having these episodes of atrial fibrillation 2 to 3 times per week. And therein started my journey as a patient. So I'd, been thrust from junior doctor into patient mode. And I was still working as a doctor, but I started taking flecainide and antiarrhythmic. I was also on some other medications to reduce my heart rate. And I had all the investigations. They couldn't figure out a cause. And just sort of a bit of background for the listener, atrial fibrillation has many different causes. Right. It could be as a result of an infection. It could be from drug use. I wasn't a drug user. It could be from no particular reason. And we tend to see it in the older age group. So as a 24-year-old previously fit and well person, very unusual to have atrial fibrillation. I had the electrophysiology studies looking to see whether there was a re-entry pathway or something structurally wrong with the heart. Nothing. And so I was going to have what's called an ablation, which is where you have an area around the pulmonary vein where you essentially burn to ring fence these misfiring cells. And I was 100% going to have this procedure. I was about to load myself up on an anticoagulant to thin my blood. And my mum, who's not a medic, who's not a physician or medically trained, she's just typical Indian matriarch. She was like, you really need to think about your diet and lifestyle before you start with any aggressive interventions. And I thought she was crazy, but I spoke to my cardiologists and they gave me the blessing to try some lifestyle things. And they're like, look, you're going to come back in 3 months to have this ablation procedure. If you want to play around with food and all the rest of it, be my guest, but like, you're going to have to come back. So I started changing up my breakfasts. So I outwent the cereals. I was having lots of refined grains in my cereals. And in came sort of leftovers and nuts and seeds, and I would make my own bread and all the rest of it. Out went the sandwiches at the hostel canteen. In came sort of me bringing in my own sort of salads with like miso and all these different fermented vegetables. And then instead of having pasta at night, I would like make something from scratch that would actually be my breakfast or the lunch the next day. And gradually I started introducing new things, meditation, improving my sleep, lighter exercise like yoga and Pilates instead of like HIIT training. And my episodes that I was rigorously tracking every single day went from 2 to 3 times per week to 0 over about a period of a year. And therein lies like the question, like, why did this happen?
Right.
How is this possible? Why wasn't I taught this at medical school? Right. And then, from 2010, 2011, I just started doing a deep dive into the literature, learning about the gut microbiome, learning about inflammation, learning about mindset, learning about sleep medicine, learning about the importance of movement. And I got introduced to the Institute of Functional Medicine. I came out over here to come to some of the lectures. I started watching, Mark Hyman and Jeff Bland, or like all these sort of like the forefathers of functional medicine talk about this. And I started talking to patients about it as a doctor who was doing family medicine, A&E. And honestly, Darshan, it was like revolutionary because I started seeing patients improve.
Right.
I started, really reinvigorating myself with a different way of doing medicine rather than just reactive sick care. It was preventative, exciting care where people took control of their health rather than being subservient to whatever the doctor or nurses said. And then I realized, look, I'm getting really late in my clinic because in the NHS, we're going to have like 7 to 8 minute appointments, right?
7 to 8 minutes. Wow.
7 to 8 minutes. And you can imagine someone comes in and they're like, I've got type 2 diabetes. I might be depressed. I've also got this other social issue. We're like, how on earth can you do this in 8 minutes? It's impossible. And I was trying to give them the recipes on top of this. So I realized around this time, like, I've got to start like writing down recipes and putting it on a blog. And that's where the idea of the Doctor's Kitchen came about. Man. So it was just honestly a means for me to be more efficient with my clinic time. And then I started getting more attention on socials. A publisher came knocking and said, this could be a cookbook. And I was like, what are you talking about? I can't do a cookbook. I'm a medical doctor. And then therein lies the rest of my professional journey. It's like I went from cookbooks to BBC shows to YouTube to podcasts. I now have a tech company where we have recipes that are aligned with different health goals, gut health, brain health, skin health, using the latest in nutritional medicine. I did a nutritional medicine master's, and I'm just constantly learning all the time, like from folks like yourself with what you're doing with Next Health, the next level of like how we do cancer screening, prevention, But it all boils down, and like it sounds very complicated to people from the outside, right? You know, we're talking about mitochondrial health, we're talking about inflammation levels, we're talking about the gut microbiome. We're scratching the surface with the gut microbiome. We're talking about bacteria right now, but actually we should be thinking about viruses and nematodes and fungi and all these other critters that live within our body. But it all comes down to the very simple principles: eating unprocessed food, moving every day, and living in alignment with our circadian biology, you know, and magic can happen. So when I look back at I'll get off my soapbox for a second, but when I look back at my own patient journey, what did I do? I put myself in alignment with how my body is meant to be.
Right.
I ate the right food. I started moving. I started improving my sleep, and all whilst being a junior doctor with you know, what
really crazy schedule.
It's a crazy schedule. It's a lot of stress. You're learning things on the job, but if I was able to do that, it's, you know, it gives a lot of other people hope that they can do it, whatever their life circumstances. And this is what I'm passionate about, man. This is literally like my purpose. I feel aligned. I love talking about food. I love creating recipes that reflect people's backgrounds. Like, we're Indian, and, you know, I do Indian recipes. It's not just kale salads. It's like Korean food and like Mediterranean and even American food can be built and architected within the principles of like what a healthy plate looks like, which is getting enough protein, ensuring you're looking after your gut, and reducing inflammation.
Right.
These are the sort of pillars for how we should be creating food. So yeah, sorry, that was a long origin story there, but yeah, that's how I got involved in this whole field.
It's really funny because, you know, it's very similar to my story, where I same health struggles, learned about functional medicine, turned my own health around. I'm like, why are more doctors not practicing this type of medicine? And look, like, we need to have medicine the way it's traditionally practiced, right? Thank goodness we have pharmaceuticals that can treat really bad things.
100%.
But at the same time, using functional medicine techniques and the things that you're talking about, we can reverse these chronic disease issues. Even atrial fibrillation can be reversed to where you can avoid procedures, you can get off medications. Absolutely. And that's the key, is using them concurrently. And, you know, I know so many people now that have avoided the ablation surgery by using lifestyle. Mona, who you're interviewing with later, I don't know if you know this, but she had the same story.
No way, really?
Yes, she had the same story. Gosh. She had a arrhythmia. She went and joined her ashram. She was on the table for the ablation, and she said, I'm not doing it.
That's incredible.
On the table. And then she went to an ashram and just completely reversed and never needed the ablation.
I'm going to have to ask her about
you guys have that common
100%.
for sure. And anyhow, so what I found is, for something that's a knee-jerk reaction for Western medicine, which is you have an arrhythmia that cannot be controlled with medication, you have to get an ablation done. It's such a knee-jerk for us to think that way. And to put this new mindset in there, and the number of dangerous procedures that can be avoided, not just for the heart, but the entire body, all these procedures we do, and these dangerous medications we put people on. It's worth a try.
100%. 100%. And especially when it comes to diseases of lifestyle, right? So when we think about type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, these drugs that we have available to us, great. Let's keep them in the box. Let's, like, you know, they should be in like glass jars where it's like you smash to like
in case of emergency.
In case of emergency, exactly. Because, you know, working as a medical practitioner, and I know, like, once you start someone on a drug, it's only so long until they have to go to the second one, the third one, and then we have to review them for side effects. And we have a really big issue with something called polypharmacy that the BMJ wrote an article about many years ago, and I think a lot more doctors are becoming more aware of. But before we get to that point, let's put people's bodies in alignment. So, because we're not meant to have type 2 diabetes. We're not meant to have these issues with our hearts. We're meant to be actually thriving, healthy, energetic individuals. And whilst there is, the process of aging, that can 100% be delayed. So we get better health span rather than just like extending the lifespan. So there's just so many things that we could be doing as doctors. And the other really good thing about it is that it reignites your passion as a doctor as well, as a physician. When you see people actually getting healthier and happier rather than just on the next drug and the drug after that, let's try and delay that as much as possible. Because I agree with you, but, as a conventionally trained doctor, these drugs and interventions we have are incredible and they are amazing. But let's try and delay the use of those as much as possible and establish people's relationships with their bodies and this sort of N of one of thinking.
Right, exactly. And I think we're at a perfect moment in society right now where we've taken Western medicine to a really far degree. The pendulum is so swung all the way towards drug discovery, people making trillions of dollars off medications and hospitals and surgeries and robotic surgery. I mean, there's an incredible amount of technology there, right? And so that's great. Thank goodness we have that in case we have a heart attack or we get diagnosed with cancer, we get hit by a bus. Thank God we have all that, right?
Yeah.
But once you put it together with lifestyle interventions, functional medicine, living with your circadian biology, and you make that kind of the other half of the equation, now you have this incredible system that's there for emergencies, but most people are staying healthy and will never need it in the first place by utilizing what you and I are talking about. So, rather than these two systems fighting against each other, they're both just, two sides of the same coin of where we're headed as a society, which is having more longevity.
Yeah.
And we're going to add years to our life, but they're useless if we don't add functional years where we're enjoying our time alive, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I think it's a real opportunity for folks in the UK because we have a universal healthcare system. It's not free. People pay for it via taxation. But the amount of expenditure every single year is going up and up and up. It's over 100 billion every single year that the UK taxpayer pays into the NHS. Apart from the fact that it is terribly bureaucratic, which is the reason why I left the NHS a couple of years ago, because it was like you were saying, 7 to 8 minutes, you can't do anything in these appointments. And it was a real uphill battle for me, trying to instigate any change within the system. So I'm trying to do it outside by just getting people to eat healthier. But there's a real opportunity to save taxpayers money and actually make the whole system a lot more efficient by creating healthier people. And it takes a bit of lateral thinking, but it's 100% there because the amount of money that we spend on drugs could be spent on things like community centers where we actually do exercise classes for free, telemedicine where we actually do check-ins with health coaches, and with AI and automation now, there's a real opportunity to actually expand our current workforce. I don't know if you know this, but so in my company, we started the Doctor's Kitchen app 3 years ago now.
That's a great app.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So not only do we create recipes every single week and, that are geared towards the nutritional medicine evidence on different health goals, we trained a virtual Dr. Rupy avatar using my voice. And so you can actually have a conversation with me based on all the articles that I've written, based on all the podcasts that I've recorded. And you can ask it questions. Should I fast? What do you think about this? How do I swap this ingredient in this recipe? And there is a real opportunity now to magnify this kind of this personal touch to people's day to day where they don't need to ask questions and try and figure out themselves. They actually have a mini health coach with them. So what we can do currently with the technology we have available to us is just not being explored as much as it should be. And there's cost saving opportunities as well as life saving opportunities, particularly, from my perspective in the UK and Europe.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I think once again, another part of this incredible convergence of this time period is the technology, and your virtual Dr. Rupy is amazing. I mean, people can learn so much and on the fly for what's affecting them in that moment. Recipe swaps or, all the things you talk about. I mean, you get answers right away, trained on the data from your books and your podcasts. Yeah. And by the way, your podcast is awesome, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I've been listening to some episodes and, I think The Doctor's Kitchen is the name of the podcast, right?
Yeah,
People can get a lot more great information from there. So I want to dive into some of the topics that I think that you speak really eloquently about and give people some real take-home actionable tools.
For sure,
okay? I think one of the things that you've touched on a lot in your podcast is this concept of a relatively new concept is that we have our phones. Now, these have been around for the last 20 years. Apps, I think, have been around for only like 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And in the last 10 years, we have completely rewired our brains because of these apps that are now available to us on demand all the time, right? And unfortunately, or fortunately, these apps have made our life so much better, more convenient. We have so much available to us all the time. Unfortunately, we are so intimately connected with this phone now through these apps that it's hard to move away. And some of that is through necessity, and some of it is through dopamine hits. And you give some really good kind of frameworks to think about this and some really good actionable steps on how to mitigate some of this damage, right?
Yeah.
So dive into that for me.
Yeah. So I realized early this year, we just had a son, my 8-month-old, and I think I had this realization where I was playing with him and, he's just started crawling. But I was spending time with him, but I had my phone in my hand. I was like, this device is stealing away some precious moments that I will never experience ever again with this bundle of joy. I mean, he's not always a bundle of joy. He can cry and they hear pooping area, nappies everywhere. So it's a bundle of distraction.
Really 4 more years now.
Yeah. He's a bundle of joy and a bundle of destruction at the moment as well. But I remember having this moment. I was like, gosh, I'm addicted to my phone. And I had Johan Hari on my podcast a couple of years ago. He wrote this incredible book called Stolen Focus. Yeah. And it was all about the gradual degradation of our attention span over the preceding few years, because in part of digital devices that are engineered to steal our attention. And it was a bit of a penny drop moment for me then, but I don't think I fully appreciated it until I had my son. And I realized that these moments are being stolen from me.
Can I ask you a quick question on that? Because I want to just make sure that we give people examples of how is this device engineered to steal our attention?
So everything, like let's take a typical social media app, right? So not only is it trained on what your preferences are and what your likes are, but also subtle nudges to the algorithm that you are interested in a certain subject matter. So it won't even register like that you like something. It will register that you like something, even if you haven't tapped that you like it or commented on it. Like these are sort of high value triggers to it. But if you've hovered over it for more than 4 or 5 seconds, it registers the fact that you are interested in whatever it might be, even if you're embarrassed to like double click it or whatever it might be. Yeah. So as soon as you open the app, it is so good at bringing your attention to something that you are genuinely interested in.
And what's crazy about this, like for people making content, which I just started doing like a year ago. Yeah. Instagram actually reports to you, it reports to you obviously if someone liked it or if someone interacted. That's great. Like you said, that's a high value interaction, but it shows you on all your posts how many people watched past 3 seconds. Yeah. And they figured out the magic number is 3 seconds where you've captured someone's attention. Yeah. And then Instagram is now training creators on how to keep people's attention past 3 seconds. Yeah. So they've actually figured out exactly how to get you hooked. To their app, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And that's what you're talking about, the engineering.
100%,
right?
Yeah. And you're literally like, people just say, I'll put the phone down or like, like turn it off or take the app off. You're working against thousands of engineers from the like highest, most privileged universities, the smartest minds in the world, who are all working on digital design to keep you engaged, because the engagement is the currency. It's not how much you spend. It's not how much. The number one thing, the number one priority of all these different companies is engagement, because they know that engagement can be monetized, which is why these are the most lucrative companies in the world right now. And so, like, regardless of like how much you want to fight this app,
device, right? Yeah.
Whatever app it might be, it's not just social media apps. Like even we are like looking at digital behavior techniques to try and keep people engaged. Obviously for good reasons, because we want to get people to eat healthier. But we're all in this game. And you mentioned 3 seconds for Instagram. For TikTok, it's even less. It's like literally, we're talking less than a second. We're talking milliseconds here. So I realized that I was having this issue, and there's a number of different ways. In the same way an addict can come off a substance. Yeah. There's complete cold turkey and abstinence.
Catch you before you go into that, because I want to definitely dive into that. But you said one really powerful thing to me that I did not realize about this. For example, social media, it goes beyond that 3 seconds, or it goes beyond looking at your phone for like 10, 15 minutes, because you get into these thought loops, right? That last way beyond that. Yeah. So can you talk about that a little bit, real quick?
Yeah. So, I mean, like everything on your phone, particularly on social media apps, is sort of geared to make you feel there's a balance between entertainment and wanting. And this idea that you are not enough or you're not doing enough can lead to these negative spiral loops that make you feel pretty terrible afterwards. Like, I don't think anyone's had a 15 or 30-minute session on social media and they were like, oh, great. I'm really glad I spent that amount of time on social media. I feel entertained. I feel better about myself. I feel more positive about life. I feel motivated. I'm going to do something like, positive. I don't think anyone's had these thoughts. I mean, there are great content creators out there. Don't get me wrong. I love your content that you started putting out on social media, and the content that I put out, I'm hoping is like, going to be net positive. But unfortunately, it's mixed in with a million of all this other stuff that we know is engineered to like just keep you on the platform. And it's not like the positive affirmation stuff that you actually want to enjoy on your app. So that's where my worry is with these apps. And I think going into the solutions, it's either like, pure abstinence, or you can potentially moderate it. And there are a few apps like that where it will cut you off after 10 minutes, or, it will gray out your screen, or give you a reminder that you've been on the social media app for certain. Those might work for certain people. My perspective is I need complete shutdown from these apps. I need to physically remove myself from the phone as well. And so there is this concept of a kale phone and a cocaine phone. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before.
I heard about it through you.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was popularized by a blogger called Alex Mack, I think. No, George Mack, sorry. And the concept of you got a cocaine phone, and a cocaine phone is nothing to do with the drug. It's all to do with the dopamine roller coaster of all the different apps that you have. So you've got TikTok, you've got Instagram, you've got even LinkedIn is like, turned into yet another social media app with the same sort of digital behavior techniques. And this is just constantly giving you stimulation. And then you have another phone, like another physical phone that you use out of business hours, right? And this has just got Uber, Google Maps, maybe WhatsApp or iMessage, whatever you want to use, and that's it. And this is what I've actually started instigating myself now, like physically removing myself from the phone that gives me way too much stimulation and wastes a lot of my time, and physically putting in like a kale phone, which I use on weekends. And what this does is it enables me to be super present with my kids, super present with my family at weekends, which is protected time, without the draw of the other phone. Because I don't know if you ever had this moment, but like whenever you're bored or whenever you're in a queue, what do? You pull out your phone.
Right.
We're so used to having this entertainment and this constant stimulation that we search for it, even when we're paying for our shopping. It's just, it doesn't make, it's such an unusual and extreme behavior that has only been learned over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
We have the subway system in London. When you go into the subway system in London, or you go into a bus, every single person on the phone, no judgment. I'm part of that. I'm part of that crew. And what I've started doing now is giving myself purposeful, mindful moments where I do not look at my phone. I put my phone in my bag so I don't have the temptation to take it out of my pocket. And I will sit and endure boredom, because boredom is so good for our brain.
Right.
It's where we get creativity. It's where we have shower thoughts.
Yes.
Have you ever had that moment where you're in the shower, you're like, oh my God, that's a great idea. Yeah. It's because you've given your brain space to not do anything and wander. And so this idea of mind wandering is something I think we really need to reestablish a relationship with. And one of the ways in which I do that is with a kale phone that we can.
I love this. I'm going to do this for sure, because I feel that one of the things I did a while ago was take my email app off of my phone. And that lasted all of like, a week.
Yeah.
because I needed it, you know.
Yeah.
But I think there's times during the workday you need a cocaine phone because you're working and you need access to email and things. And
100%.
you're creating content, whatever have you. But having a separate phone for when you're around your kids and your family where you don't have that temptation.
Yeah.
It's so crazy because, going back to evolutionary biology, I think about the early humans. And by early, I mean 80 years ago.
Yeah.
What did they do when they were bored, right?
Yeah.
Right? When they were standing in line or in the subway, what did they do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They didn't have a phone to go to with apps on it.
Yeah.
They took out a book to read, or they just stood there and looked around, right?
Or they had a conversation with someone. Like, behold, it probably wouldn't happen in London, but
right? But all these things have been kind of deleted from society now. And like, we talked about, it's only been the last decade or so.
Yes, exactly.
And we forgot what life was like before this last decade.
Yeah.
It's so important to get back to that and remember that, because I think that, we're running this massive experiment over the last decade, and we're going to be running it for the next couple of decades. And we're going to find out the results in 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Where everyone's attention has been totally destroyed. And kids, especially can't live without looking at the phone.
Yeah.
And I don't want to wait 20 years to find out the results of this experiment, because I can't imagine that they're that good.
Yeah. I mean, I've got an 8-month-old now, as I've said, and we're getting asked questions about our response to when we're going to introduce screens. And because schooling is very much geared around computer use now, like, he's going to have a relationship with the screen. But it's like, how do we mitigate that? In the same way, how are we going to mitigate his relationship with ultra-processed food? He's going to go to parties at some point when he's older. He's going to have, cake and candies and all the rest of it. How do we develop a healthy relationship where there's not extreme one way, but it's not extreme the other way? And I feel that the default option right now is the extreme one way of as much candy as you like, as much screen time as you like, as much, dopamine, all this, there's just dopamine everywhere. And I think, for us, we cook everything from scratch. I mean, I'm the doctor's kitchen, so I'm cooking all the baby food from scratch and doing all his weaning stuff. And, he doesn't have any exposure to added sugars currently. We're removing all screens. Like, we don't allow him to use any screens at this point. We're going to try and mitigate that as much as possible throughout his early years. And I think we just have to be a lot more mindful and purposeful of our kids, because otherwise society has moved in a very extreme way. And I mirror your concerns about how this is going to play out in 15 to 20 years from now.
Right.
And I also think, the advent of AI and robotics we haven't even scratched the surface yet, but this is going to become the norm as well.
Yeah. It's just going to create more comfort, more time where we're not using our bodies, using our brains. Yeah. And it's an incredible time we live in, but we got to protect, especially our children. My son is now 11, and he kind of grew up in this decade of discovering how do we, use screens with toddlers, right? And thank God he was not 10 years older, and, we had to discover how to relate to social media. And I think we already know the negative effect social media has had on people that have been exposed to it in their teen years. But he was a child, and everywhere we went, at restaurants, people would be handing their phone to their children or their iPad when they came out to their children to keep them kind of babysat at the restaurant. Yeah. And we were very suspect of that, because we thought that this could not be good. Yeah. But we did it a few times. Yeah. And
I imagine you have to sometimes. Yeah.
And the behavior change that occurs when kids are on screens a lot and taking them off of the screens, it's nuts. Like, getting them off the screens.
For sure.
Most kids don't handle that very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we decided very early to reduce the screen exposure and not use it at restaurants, et cetera. Yeah. And thank goodness, because, we see a lot of kids now that have really bad attention deficit, behavior issues from being on screens all the time.
I never forget this moment I had. It was about 5 or 6 years ago. I was working in pediatric A&E at the hospital that I used to work full-time at. And a mother and a child come in. I think he's got a tummy ache and a fever and something relatively mild. She's got her phone and he's watching a YouTube cartoon. He must have been about 4 or 5, something like that. And in the consultation room that I was working in, the internet was really bad. I couldn't even get Wi-Fi. So as soon as they come in, kids watching the YouTube, he's nice and settled. YouTube cuts out. This child explodes in the clinic room. Right. Yeah. And like, she's really apologetic. He's crying. Yada, yada. He was completely subdued when he came in. As soon as that YouTube video wasn't buffering anymore and it cut out, my word, it was like World War III had just broken out.
Scary.
And it was really scary to me. And like, I haven't got kids at that point. I don't have like young siblings or nieces or nephews. And so for me, it was a real stark moment of, wow, it wasn't the tummy pain. It wasn't the fever that brought him that much pain. It was the lack of screen access. Yeah. And it just sort of exploded. He didn't have any issues, no behavioral problems at all. Just a quote unquote normal child who just, loves watching YouTube. And I remember it just stuck in my mind. It's like, there's something wrong with the screen that is leading to this kind of behavior when it's taken away. Like if you take candies off, they might moan and scream. That's fine. But like this was like really out of character, I would say. Wow. And I've never forgotten that. And I've just thought to myself then, I was like, I've got to be careful with screens when I have kids one day, because this, I think, is an aftermath and an effect of almost reliance on digital stimulation.
Absolutely. And, it's almost like drug-seeking behavior in an adult that's addicted to heroin. I hate to say it. I mean, it's like the mini version of that in kids, because these kids not only flip out when they don't have the device, but they're constantly trying to negotiate more time with the device. Yeah. They're constantly trying to like trick you into giving them the device. Yeah. They're stealing the device from your pocket. Yeah. Like these are all behaviors of people that are, older adults that look for drugs. It's very similar, because I look at it, the mini version of that. You have to protect your children.
Absolutely,
this, right? So,
and it makes sense from a biological point of view. I mean, like it might not be as extreme as substance abuse, but like the behaviors that they do mimic. Like kids are smart as well. They will bargain. They'll trick you. They'll ask the other parent. All these different like techniques.
Exactly. Okay, so I love the kale phone.
Okay, yeah.
You also talk a little bit about how to avoid some electronic use, like during the day, in the morning especially. Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, me and my wife are trying really hard to not have our phones in our bedroom at all.
Yes.
We have an alarm clock instead of having our alarm on our phone. We have everything on plane mode. We shut down our phones at like 8:30 p.m. So there's a real good block of time where we don't have any stimulation whatsoever. And I want to make sure that I protect my mornings as much as possible, because as soon as you take that flight mode off, you just get messages. And I'm very fortunate to have friends in Australia, America, obviously in the UK as well. And you just get a flurry of messages, and it's almost like inviting like 10 people that you know in your room at the same time. And then you flip on a social media app, and then you've got like 30 people, 40 people, some people you don't know, like, what are you guys doing here? And so you just have all this like attention grabbing. And, we were talking about mind wandering and creativity. In the morning, your brain is just so alive, and it hasn't been disturbed or polluted with any ideas. This is like prime time for your brain to just breathe and like come up with ideas for the day. And so I try and protect this time when I do my morning exposure to light. When I do my exercise in the morning, I won't have looked at my phone prior to that. I might listen to a bit of music, but even then, like I'm trying to not listen to music when I exercise as well. I might sound like a bit of a caveman at the moment, but during those times where I'm like working out and stuff, and I'm like pumping blood to my brain, I'm getting an adrenaline and cortisol bump, this is actually where I'm probably most creative. So I want to protect that as much as possible. And the other thing I did, Darshan, which is a little bit more extreme, is earlier this year I did a silent retreat.
Yeah.
And I was always skeptical about silent retreats, because I thought it's a bit too extreme. What are the benefits? Is this proven? Yada, yada. But I thought I'll do a 3-day sort of like mini silent retreat. And just for the listener, there's no writing, no reading, no listening, obviously no talking, no digital devices, obviously. There's very minimal stimulation. Yeah. And you're just sat there with your thoughts. And it's a very scary place to be, considering most of our thoughts are injected via the phone or via news or via like external stimulation. So I would say it's the first time in decades that I've actually had this moment where I've just been there with my thoughts and I've had no external stimulation. I did it somewhere in the UK called the Lake District, which is very pristine and there's loads of nature and all the rest of it. We had like a guided yoga every day, but again, no talking, nothing. And I don't think I realized the benefits of having that 3-day period during my silent retreat, that I created space in my day to day. I didn't have this sort of like reflex action to grab my phone. I'd almost like reset my dopamine, and I can't wait to do this again, honestly, Darshan. It's literally like, it was life-changing that 3 days. And I know that a 7 or a 10-day retreat is going to be even more so to reset my dopamine, because I don't want to suggest that you have to go from one extreme to the other, but this silent extreme actually gave me a lot more awareness of how I need to lean into silentness, or like, removal of digital distractions during my day to day as well. And I highly recommend it to everyone.
It's amazing. I mean, it sounds so uncomfortable. It sounds like, how would I even get through an hour of it, And then I think back once again, evolutionarily, my caveman brother from like 1,000 years ago, this is what they did. When they were alone, sometimes they would just be by themselves for days and days and days, wandering, and they didn't have books. They didn't have digital devices, obviously. This is what we are wired to thrive in, right? That is incredible.
It's like giving your brain the space where it can operate. And like I started doing funny things when I was doing my silent retreat, where I would just chronicle like all my earliest memories, and I would start thinking about things that I hadn't thought about for years, because I gave myself the space to do that. And I'm not just talking about physical separation from it. I'm talking about like space from external stimulation, which is what we're constantly bombarded with. It's one of the reasons why I love podcasting, actually, because, during this conversation, we don't have any digital devices. We don't have any external sort of conversations. We just have a face-to-face conversation. You get to know someone a bit more, and like, you get to share it, which is great. So I think we need to introduce a lot more of these silent experiences that you can pepper through your day, rather than having to constantly go and physically remove yourself from the modern world.
I always joke around with people that are having troubles in their relationship. I'm like, just come to my podcast studio, sit with your wife for an hour and just have a podcast. And then it's like no one talks to their significant other anymore in this way where you're connected and you're not distracted. And just kind of sit there and look at each other and talk, because it doesn't happen very often. And so, I love getting back to normal conversations like this that are not just emojis on a phone.
It's funny, like when me and my now wife had therapy like 4 or 5 years ago now, I think it was during COVID, one of the things that we started doing was having weekly check-ins, where it's just like, okay, we're going to spend half an hour on a Saturday or Sunday, or go for a walk or whatever, and we're just going to check in, like, how are you feeling? Is there anything that I've done to piss you off this week? Like, how are you thinking about this? And I would just have like a normal conversation like that. And when you get, really busy in the day-to-day, she works in finance, I'm running my business, now we've got an 8-month-old. Like, if you don't create time, that time will be sucked away from you. And so we've been very intentional with our like week, where we do have a period of time where we do like a mini podcast, and it's like less formal, but it's like, we do it over a walk or whatever, and we just check in. And I just think for us, at least, that's a really healthy way to maintain a sane and fruitful relationship. Just having open, honest conversations.
That's fantastic. So I could talk to you forever about so many things. I mean, you're so knowledgeable in a lot of fields that can really help move the needle for people. But where you've really dedicated a lot of your life's energy is in reintroducing people to food. And what I mean by that is, again, over the last couple of decades, our relationship with food has been decimated, especially here in the United States, where ultra-processed food and fast food has just become a way of life. I heard from a friend of mine who's in the construction business that the least valuable room now for Americans in the whole house is the kitchen.
Really?
And they're thinking about kind of just eliminating it and just giving people like a sink and a microwave and a toaster oven. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like making it a closet instead of like a kitchen.
Yeah.
And it's so backwards what's happened, And so I'd love to hear some of kind of the biggest points that you put out in your book as far as how to think about our relationship with food. And then maybe after that, we can talk about some big picture dietary advice.
100%. Yeah. So, I mean, like, when I started my media career and, doing the cookbooks and all the rest of it, I dived really deep into the science and I love it. And, you love it as well. I had this graph in my second cookbook, Eat to Beat Illness, where I looked at all the different sort of principles of healthy eating. And they were influenced by things like chrononutrition, like when you eat rather than just what you eat. Polyphenols and the science of phytochemicals, all the different thousands of chemicals that we have in fruits and vegetables. I talked about mitochondrial health. I talked about population studies. I talked about the science of fasting, like all these different things. It was all geared towards these principles. And I realized, wow, I really complicated it and I overcomplicated it for the audience. And so that's why with the content I'm putting out now and this book, I've really just distilled all this information into very simple principles that you can apply every time you sit down to eat. And these are the three things, right? Yep. Am I getting enough protein at this meal? Are there ingredients that are supporting my gut health? And is the overall impact of this meal pro or anti-inflammatory? If you can answer positively to those three things, you're looking at a really healthy plate of food that will improve your metabolic health, your cardiovascular health, your energy, your longevity. This is all in line with the principles that we know that diet can have an impact on your health. So ensure you get enough protein, ensure that it's gut healthy, and ensure that it's anti-inflammatory. How do you do that? Well, you go for unprocessed foods, you make sure you're getting plenty of fiber, you lean into probiotic-rich foods, and you eat in a pattern that is largely Mediterranean. What does that mean? It doesn't mean it needs to be Mediterranean flavored. No. It just needs to be anti-inflammatory in terms of colorful fruits and vegetables, good quality oils, things like extra virgin olive oil, nuts and seeds that are healthy fats, avocado, and pulses as well. So like lentils and beans and stuff. And that's it. But like I said earlier, it's like the science is complex, which is what I used to love talking about early in my career. The solutions are simple. What I've just said, get enough protein, make sure your gut is looked after, and make sure it's anti-inflammatory. Implementation. That's the hard stuff. Wow. That is the real hard stuff. How do I do this on Monday morning when I'm running around with the kids? How do I make sure that I don't lose heart midway through the week and it's a Thursday and I haven't packed my lunch and I don't know what options to buy when I'm out? How do I figure out what to eat when I'm like at my friend's house and they've just cooked steak and barbecue and like there's no like healthy ingredients? Like, how do you navigate all this stuff? Well, there are certain practices that I've learned over my years of maintaining my health, like fasting. You don't need to eat. If you can't find anything to eat, you don't need to eat right then. Like, you've got the biology, man. Like your ancestors experienced extreme famine that we don't need to now. Exactly. But you're not going to die if you miss a meal. That's totally fine. If you can't find healthy food right now, don't worry about it. Drink some water. You're good. And then just make sure that you grab something healthy on your way home or whatever, at home or whatever you have. So everything that is geared in my career is trying to help people find the solutions to what is a very complicated food landscape. Yeah. Where there's ultra processed food everywhere and there's healthy food, things that are masquerading as healthy food that are actually super ultra processed as well. Absolutely. I mean, most of the healthy supermarkets out here are like full of not great stuff, if I'm honest. So just stick to the vegetable aisle, stick to the good quality protein aisle, and make sure you're getting gut healthy ingredients. Right. No, that's great principles to live by. And, I'm a big believer that Pareto principle, the 20-80 principle. I think 80% of the time, if you can do this, that's a really great start. And it'll lead to you doing it 99% of the time. Yeah. And so 100%. I think that some of the things that people struggle with is, number one, this concept of how many vegetables to get in your diet every day, right? And so, you and I are both familiar with the study that it's actually a lot more than we think, right? And so maybe you could talk a little bit about the research around how many vegetables we need, why we need them, and some
tips and techniques for people to get them into their diet?
Yeah, so there was this famous study, I believe it was published in The Lancet in 2018 or 2019, and they looked at the ideal number of vegetables per portion or portion per day that stayed off something called all-cause mortality, so any reason for death. They also looked at subfractions of the data looking at cancer, cardiometabolic disease, cardiovascular disease. And everyone's heard of 5 a day. So get enough fruits and vegetables. 5 a day is 5 portions of 80-gram portions of fruits and vegetables. So greens and colorful vegetables, etc. Turns out that was completely arbitrary. And it was a story, a good story, because, there's nothing wrong with eating fruits and vegetables, but it was a story that was made up by a Food and Grocery Administration to try and sell more fruits and vegetables in America. It came from the 1980s, I believe. So there's no science behind it whatsoever. It's completely arbitrary. Turns out we actually need to be eating anywhere between 600 and 800 grams of fruits and vegetables per day, which is closer to 10 portions of fruits and vegetables a day. That sounds like a lot. And to be honest, it is a lot. But if you break it down per meal and a typical eating pattern of 3 meals a day, it's basically getting 3 portions of fruits and vegetables at each meal with a snack in between, like an apple or a piece of fruit, whatever. And lots of different things counts as fruit and vegetables. So I personally count a handful of nuts or seeds as one of your fruits and vegetables. The reason why is because they contain phytonutrients, these plant chemicals that have anti-inflammatory effects and are really good for our health. They contain things like vitamin E and other minerals as well, and other vitamins. So I think they're just as powerful as fruits and vegetables as well. Beans and legumes can also count as fruits and vegetables. So you don't have to think of salad and romaine lettuce and iceberg from your fruits and vegetables. In fact, I would take those out of the equation because they're generally not that nutrient dense.
Exactly.
I would say you want to go for the dark leafy vegetables. You want to go for things like tomatoes and squash and even starchy vegetables like sweet potato. Fantastic. Those can all count as your fruits and vegetables. So a typical breakfast for me would be leftovers, sweet potato hash with corn, maybe some eggs and like a side of like greens. Like I've hit 3 vegetables right there. And, I haven't really tried, if I'm honest. And that's like counting of 3 to my 10 a day. So just doing that consistently every single day is like really like ideal. And this is where I came up with this just one more philosophy, right?
About that,
So I did a TED talk a number of years ago where I talked about the impact of food and why we should be thinking about food as medicine. And a concept I came up with was every time you sit down to eat a meal, just think to yourself, can you add one more? Can you add one more fruit, vegetable, nut, or seed at every meal? Just one more. So if you're having a casserole, can you add some butternut squash to it? If you're having a salad, can you add some pumpkin seeds to it? Every meal, can you just think to yourself, can you add one more fruit or vegetable? And if you do that, you're going to get close, if not exceed that 9 to 10 portions of vegetables every single day. And by virtue of doing that, you're flooding your body with micronutrients. You're giving your body a lot more fiber. You're unprocessing your diet. And we know these are all things that counteract cancer cells in your body, reduces inflammation, supports your gut health, and can improve your longevity as well. So these are the simple sort of little hacks and little like heuristics that I want people to have at the tip of their tongue.
Yeah, I love it. Those are all such great tips and, easy to implement once you start getting into the habit again of preparing your own meals. I think that's something that a lot of people unfortunately have gotten away from.
Totally, And I'm trying to create meals that 3 or 4 ingredients. So it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. In fact, I had some friends over yesterday at the Airbnb that we're staying at, and I just threw together some massaged cavallonero, which is a type of kale, like a leafy green. Massaged that with we had some leftover sweet potato that I'd roasted. I made a very simple vinaigrette with olive oil, Dijon mustard that was low sugar, and I added some white beans. I just roasted some white beans and put that, and we had some protein on the side. Just a very simple meal that had 3 different types of vegetables in. It was satiating. It was unprocessed. It was super healthy. It didn't take me that long. They loved it. And because we make it from scratch, it's like, it just tastes so much better.
Yeah. So talk about how people can add more protein to their meals. Because I think most people are not getting enough protein unless you're really thinking about it.
Yeah. This is a relatively new concept, which is why I wrote the book Healthy High Protein, actually, because I used to think protein, we didn't really need to think about.
What's the name of the book? I'm sorry, Healthy High Protein.
Yeah.
Was that the book prior to this one?
No, this is the book.
Here it is right here, Healthy High Protein. Okay, so tell us, what are we going to learn in this book?
So, I mean, I used to think that protein wasn't what people should be focusing on. People should really be thinking about fiber and thinking about unprocessed in their diet and eating more plants. Turns out I was wrong, because the protein studies that have influenced our recommended daily allowance were done in the 1980s using very controlled studies called metabolic ward studies, but they were using nitrogen balancing techniques.
Right.
So for a very simple analogy, it's like what goes in goes out. And when you hit balance, that's where the thinking is you are protein replete. You don't need to consume any more protein because your body is already doing it.
Based on the nitrogen balance.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And these are typically done over like 2 to 3 days. So your body's very good at adapting to different stressors. And one of those stressors is not getting enough protein. Turns out, looking at different studies using different techniques where they trace the amino acids which are the building blocks of proteins around your body, we need to eat more protein, particularly if you're over the age of 50, because your body becomes less responsive to proteins. If you're menopausal, if you exercise more than a couple of times a week, you need to have more protein in your diet. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be eating more meat, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give you bigger muscles. Actually, proteins are super, super important for so many different aspects of our physiology. And so when I get people to think about eating more protein, I want you to think about having a core protein source at every meal, a plant-based partner, and a topper.
Oh, okay.
So a core protein source.
So 3 sources again.
Yeah.
Just three vegetables, 3 sources of protein.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay,
so,
talk about that.
So every, and this will help you with your fruits and vegetables and just one more and all the rest of it. So a core protein source is a protein that has more than 20 grams of protein per 100 grams.
Okay.
So this could be chicken or fish or lean steak, but it could also be tofu or tempeh or even things like edamame. So these are all things that will give you your core protein, right? You want to have a plant-based partner to that. A plant-based partner could be lentils, it could be beans, it could be azuki, black beans, turtle beans. These are all great sources of fiber. They have some protein in, not a great amount, usually less than 10 grams per 100 grams. So that's not good enough to be a core protein source, but it will give you a little bit more complexity in your meal and it supports your gut as well. And the third thing is having a topper. So a topper could be like a nut or a seed. It could be sesame. It could be a mix, like omega-3 mix. It could be some sprouted pumpkin seeds. Like these are all fantastic, different like ways in which to give texture, but also they have a bit of protein. In fact, like a handful of shelled hemp seeds, which has got all 9 essential amino acids in, will give you around 8 grams of protein.
Wow.
Which is phenomenal.
Just throw a handful on everything.
Half of that and everything. Exactly. I have that sometimes as a snack when I'm feeling hungry. And it's got also the fatty acids, the anti-inflammatory compounds.
It's like a miracle food.
Exactly. I love shelled hemp seed. I put it in my smoothie and everything. Yeah. So if you have that at each meal, you've got a core protein, you've got a plant-based partner, and you have a topper, you're going to get enough protein at your meal, right? And you don't really have to think about the macros and measuring your chicken, all this kind of stuff. Because I was kind of like that at medical school when I was trying to get my 6-pack abs in 6 weeks. And, you know, all you end up eating is just like lean chicken and brown rice and broccoli. Right. It's so boring. It's like that we don't want people to be eating that way. You want people to enjoy their food and get more complexity and have enough fiber and eat anti-inflammatory food. So core protein source, plant-based partner, and a topper.
Yeah, that's awesome structure there. And I think you mentioned something just briefly, but I want to expound on it. Is like protein has many, many effects throughout our body.
100%.
Besides just, for keeping muscle on, right?
Absolutely.
And so, the protein leverage hypothesis, which you talk about, is number one, protein is going to keep you from being hungry throughout the day.
Yeah.
So leveraging protein to manage your hunger, first meal in the morning, I think, is extremely important.
Absolutely.
To get that in as well. But yeah, maybe you can talk about, besides muscle, what are some of the other effects that protein has on our biology?
Totally. So when I talk about protein, I think I like to use the analogy of Lego. So the beauty of Lego, when we used to play with Lego, is that even if you only had like 20 different types of Lego pieces, as long as you had enough of these pieces, you could build anything from a toy car to like this magnificent spaceship or this lovely studio that we're sat in right now, right? It could all be made out of the same 20 different pieces of Lego. Well, Lego are like the building blocks in the world of toys, in the same way proteins are the building blocks in the world of biological materials. So protein in its simplest form can be amine hormones, for example, things like insulin or insulin growth factor made out of proteins. They can also be enzymes. They can also be folded into different helixes, and that can form collagen. They can form macrostructures like bones. They can be carrier molecules like lipoproteins. You know, all these different structures in our body we don't think of, but these are all made out of proteins.
Yeah.
And when you start realizing that, you realize, oh, that's why when you consume protein in your diet, only 25% goes to your muscles. The vast majority of the protein that you're consuming is going to all these other physiological processes in your body, these different biological materials. And so I want people to think about protein and move away from meat and muscles to more like, okay, this is the foundation, the building blocks of your body, right? So when you consume protein in the morning, you're replenishing the amino acids that you've broken down overnight, because overnight your liver is super active. It's rebuilding proteins. It's its primary job. It's super, super important to be aware of that. But from a pragmatic and practical standpoint, when you get enough protein in the morning, you're signaling to your brain that you're satiated. Because protein is so important for all the reasons that I've just mentioned, if you're not getting enough protein, your brain's telling you to go out and go and get some more food.
Exactly.
So if you've had refined cereal, you've had something that, you know, has had no protein whatsoever, you're still hungry. You might not feel it, but in a couple of hours' time, your brain will signal to you, you're still hungry, you need to go out and eat. Which is why people find themselves in this issue of like, okay, I'm eating loads at breakfast, but I still feel hungry. And therefore you got to go snack, and then you got to go, you know, eat some more at lunchtime. Right. So you end up over consuming calories and energy, which is what leads to weight gain. Yeah. So this protein leverage hypothesis is ensuring that you are satiated from a protein perspective first thing will signal to your brain via GLP-1 that you don't need to consume any more, and it will suppress your appetite such that you are naturally in calorie balance, or in some cases calorie deficit if you need to be, which will maintain your weight. So this is why I'm such a big fan of having protein at breakfast. It's super, super important because it maintains focus, energy, and it ensures that you're going to be instead of on this roller coaster of constant hunger signals throughout the day, it ensures that you're going to have a steady energy and you're going to eat sufficient for your needs rather than over consuming.
So well explained. I mean, protein is so 25% goes to your muscles, 75% to physiological processes.
Yeah.
So that's why your brain is like craving protein.
Yeah.
But the craving of protein is really just a hunger signal. And if you don't have any protein around, what you're saying, you'll reach for the nearest ultra-processed snack.
Exactly.
And you're still going to be hungry. It might cut off the GLP signaling like for the immediate moment, but it's just going to come right back.
Exactly.
And you're right. You know, everyone who starts adding protein to their breakfast, almost universally what I find is they start losing weight because they're not as hungry throughout the day.
Yeah. This is the thing. And that's why I'm a really big fan of having a high protein, high fiber breakfast, because both fiber and protein will contribute to the release of incretin hormones that will signal to your brain, you're satiated, you've had enough food. Right. Because when you realize just how important protein is, it's no wonder your brain's going to signal to you that you're still hungry if you haven't satisfied your protein requirements. And everyone's threshold for protein stopping their hunger is different. Yeah. And generally, we look at it on a weight basis. So the current recommendations internationally are 0.8 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight per 24 hours. It takes a little bit of math to figure out exactly what your protein requirements are, but I think it's worth doing a little bit of arithmetic.
Absolutely.
So, and we're both Indian, so we love a bit of math. So I would say the minimum is 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per 24 hours.
Sure.
And that's based on ideal body weight. So if you're overweight, let's say you're 100 kilos, but you should be at 80, you want to do the math on 80. I would say for optimum benefits, if you're over the age of 50, if you're postmenopausal, if you exercise and do resistance training, you want to be looking at close to 1.6.
Sure.
1.6 grams per kilogram per 24 hours can be quite hard for a lot of people to hit. And this is where you may benefit from having a bit of like a protein shake or like a high protein snack. I think nuts and seeds are really good for this reason as well.
Sure.
But primarily you want to be getting your protein from whole foods rather than supplemental forms. The benefits of 1.6 to 2 or 2.2, I think can be there. I would say it's definitely there if you're a bodybuilder or you're an athlete, but you want to be really careful of not going into a severe calorie surplus, which could actually lead to weight gain over time. And this is where I feel a lot of people fall into the trap because the benefits are probably marginal above that point, unless you have like an issue with malabsorption or you're not absorbing proteins correctly. But if you're trying to do this on your own, I think going for those higher protein amounts will unfortunately push out other healthier ingredients into your plate and potentially get you to overconsume food in the form of energy that can lead to weight gain.
Right. Makes sense. So there's a sweet spot that every person needs to kind of individualize for themselves.
Yeah.
And we talked about this earlier. I'm a big believer in tracking. I think hunger is a great way to track as well. If I don't think you're getting enough protein if you're still hungry throughout the day. Yeah. And then after that, I have people track their skeletal muscle mass. I get a lot of my patients a grip strength dynamometer, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
It's such an easy thing. It's cheap. It's like $14.
Totally,
and you could track your strength as well, which there's a lot of factors in there. Protein is one of them.
Yeah.
But I think as long as you're keeping skeletal muscle mass on and building skeletal muscle mass, you're not hungry.
Yeah.
You're probably getting to that point where you can not over-consume the protein. But to your point too, I think eating protein first meal in the day.
Yeah.
Even, prior to eating any carbohydrates in every meal, I think that's really helpful for reducing the total caloric intake and also creating the space to get enough protein in for the day as well.
And I think it's that latter point you just made about creating the opportunity of getting enough protein, because I need to eat 140 grams of protein per day, right? If I'm not getting enough at breakfast, that means I'm really having to load a lot of protein in my lunch and in my dinner. And even for someone with a big appetite, that's quite a lot to consume in those. So you want to look at breakfast as a real good opportunity to consume enough in your total daily intake. And if you miss that opportunity at breakfast, then unfortunately we have a lot of low protein options in the form of cereals and bars and granola and, even yogurts can be quite low depending on what brand you use. Then you're really missing out on getting that total amount. And I think to your point about grip strength and strength in general as we age, sarcopenia, I think, is going to be the defining disease of our time.
Absolutely.
And the European Working Group on Sarcopenia, they recently, I think it was a 2018 study, established sarcopenia as a primary skeletal muscle disorder, right? It's something of which the primary cause is aging, but there are secondary causes as well: malnutrition, malignancy, malabsorptive states, etc. Sarcopenia is something that can be staved off with enough protein, but also primarily by resistance training. That's probably the biggest lever that we can pull to stave off sarcopenia. And we define it as a lack of strength, a lack of muscle mass and muscle quality. The latter two are quite hard to determine, which is why I think those grip strength diameters are really good proxies for overall muscle strength. You can also do like an MRI of the thigh, and I think that's like correlates quite nicely with the rest of the muscle in your body. So and you might think of sarcopenia as the older patient in a geriatric ward in their 70s who's just had a hip fracture. But actually, I think about sarcopenia in my own. So I just turned 40 this year. And I'm thinking about sarcopenia now because I'm at the peak of like where my muscle bulk could be. And I actually need to start packing on like save it, like putting money in my pension,
Exactly.
so I can utilize that, as it unfortunately will naturally degrade over time. So I want people to start thinking about sarcopenia right now. Like as early as your 30s, you really think about sarcopenia, because this is literally like the analogy is your pension. And getting a good sort of pension bank requires two things. It's protein and resistance training, and mobility and all that kind of stuff. But those are the two primary levers. Yeah,
it's such a powerful way to kind of tie everything together here, is that, you know, you need a lot of all of this. You have to protect your brain, you have to protect your muscles, you have to protect your gut bacteria, but all of it comes down to some simple habits like the ones you mentioned today: 3 different kinds of vegetables, 3 types of protein at every meal, you know, doing some resistance training. I think everyone can achieve all of these goals when you boil it down to a few simple daily habits, which is, I know, your mission in life is to spread that as kind of like the overarching theme of what you talk about. So I'm glad we ended it there. I wish I could talk to you for hours and hours. I'm definitely going to, we need to have you back for sure.
Oh, thank you, Josh. Yeah, I'd love to come.
I love the message you're putting out there in the world. This book, Healthy High Protein, is your latest book.
Yeah. This is book number 5 now. So I've done 5 cookbooks. This is by far my favorite, because every recipe has got not only the protein amount, but also the fiber amount and the number of plant points as well. So they're super easy. And you can get it in America now, I believe, as well.
Yeah, and it's not just a cookbook. I mean, it's an educational book as well. But I feel like you're hiding the education of the recipes there too, which is
I love
very
to
tricky.
just like, feed it into the recipes themselves. But like, you're right. The front, I talk about these 3 pillars: why you need to get enough protein, why you need to look after your gut, and why you need to reduce inflammation. And just trying to super simplify it for folks, and then just, practice that with the enjoyment of cooking some healthy, delicious recipes.
I love that. And your app is available as well in the United States, globally. The Doctor's Kitchen app, right?
Yeah.
And what's next for you?
Oh, man.
Besides trying to raise an 8-month-old.
I think besides from that, I think I want to spend a lot more time in LA. I've only been here for 3 weeks now. We're here for a month in total. I'd love to do a lot more on YouTube. So we're growing our YouTube channel and doing more cooking videos and that kind of stuff. And I think the tech company and the AI virtual Dr. Rupy that we have on the app, I really want to, I see the potential for that expanding. So, everyone can have a little Dr. Rupy in their pocket to like help them when they're at the grocery store, or when they're like catering for a dinner party with some of their friends, and some of them don't eat gluten, or they don't have an allergy to certain nuts or whatever. Help them, like if they're looking at a cupboard or like some ingredients in the fridge, what can I make with this? Those kind of things. I really feel there's potential for AI to help in these situations. And I'm hoping that Doctor's Kitchen app is going to be at the forefront of that.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
I appreciate it.
Can't wait to have you back and continuing the conversation.
Thank you, man.
You're welcome.